It was one of Australia's most impressive engineering feats, a railway that cut a path and wound its way through some of the most harsh countryside that Australia has to offer. It was a vital pipeline to a wealth of material that helped to establish and build Queensland's capital city, as well as bolster the state's overall economy during the early part of the 20th century. The Brisbane Valley Railway truly was an essential part of Queensland's history. Without it, the state would not have grown and become as prosperous as it is today. Its legacy, therefore, of the railway and those who built it, truly is an important one. Thanks to the hard work and dedication by a group of avid volunteers, the legacy of the railway is still being kept alive today. Although no longer used as a railway, the line has been reborn as a national recreation trail, meaning that those with an appreciation can get up close with a key part of Australian history. The Brisbane Valley Railway line was first approved for construction in 1882, with construction beginning soon after. The line would be completed in 5 sections, starting at Walkuracka near Ipswich and running through to the small town of Yarraman. This documentary will focus on the Linville to Blackbutt section of the 150-kilometre long railway line. Of all the sections that were constructed, this was the most hazardous and challenging part. Winding its way through the steep Blackbutt ranges at 400 metres above sea level, building the line wasn't going to be an easy procedure. In spite of how difficult this task was going to be, it was of paramount importance that the railway was sent through to Blackbutt. The area contained a large quantity of important natural resources, the chief one, of course, being the timber that was grown in the area. This material was a necessity, used for a wide array of construction purposes. It was this timber that was needed to build the fledgling state's capital of Brisbane. The economic future and stability of the state depended on the railway delivering this valuable resource. The Linville to Blackbutt section is part of the 4th stage, and in September 1908, work commenced on this part of the railway line. It was tough going as the workmen made their way through the treacherous Blackbutt ranges. With many large rocky outcrops to contend with, a generous amount of explosives were used to blow a clear route through the ranges. It was clear that this was a dangerous job, and inevitably the workmen's luck ran out. On one fateful day in February 1911, a ballast train came into contact with a staging crossing over the line that a group of several men were working on. 2 men, Thomas Love and James MacDonald, were killed in the accident. Several others were injured. It wasn't just the difficult and dangerous work conditions on the railway that led to a potential death during this time. An outbreak of typhoid, particularly in the Toogoolawah area between 1908 and 1912, was described by the Queensland Times in February 1912 as reaching an epidemic level. This was due to the poor hygiene faced in many camps set up along the railway, where the hundreds of workers stayed. Along with the workmen, there were many wives and children that stayed in these camps as well. This led to another problem, the lack of education for these children, the majority of whom were of schooling age. There was a small school in Linville and a provisional school at Teromeo, but both of these schools were too small to cater for the number of children in the area. Eventually, a tent school was established at McNamara's camp, and as the railway project moved further along, so did the tent school with it. By 1913, a permanent school building was established at Benarkan, being completed in March of that year. Meanwhile, work on the line through to Benarkan was nearing completion, just 6 months after work began at Linville. This was rather surprising, given the difficult work environment. It would seem that politics played a hand in the increased speed of production during this phase of construction. A state election was called for February 1911, so the independent Premier of the time, Mr. William Kidston, decided to try and win some votes with independent members of Parliament who lived in the Brisbane Valley area, as well as metropolitan areas whose constituents needed the timber from the Blackbutt Range. Kidston increased the pace of work on the line by expanding the workforce dramatically, which was also a move to use up the allocated budget for the line to avoid it being transferred over to another political party should he lose the election. Despite these measures he took, Kidston went on to lose the election to Mr. Digby Denham of the Liberal Party. The railway through to Bunnarkin was opened on the 8th of May 1911, with the full railway through to Yarraman being opened on the 1st of May 1913. These last remaining sections from Linville to Yarraman cost a total of £347,470 at the time. Looking back today, it is rather extraordinary that this sort of engineering task was successful, given that no modern equipment or aerial photography was used as part of the construction process. The efforts of those men who undertook this Herculean task are simply astonishing. The railway was of great benefit to the area, providing not only a means of transporting goods and produce, but a necessary transport system for passengers as well. Passenger trains would leave Ipswich and head to Yarraman 3 times a week. The journey would take around 6 hours, but on the return to Ipswich it would be about 25 minutes quicker, due to the gradients in the line encountered throughout the countryside. With rail motor services starting on the line in 1928, passengers were able to travel on these as well as the steam-pulled trains. A man who travelled on both types of passenger services was Daniel Sheen. An avid railway enthusiast since a young age, Daniel took up the opportunity to travel on the Brisbane Valley Line a number of times during its heyday.
Catching the rail motor back to Brisbane, of course, wasn't very many passengers, 3 or 4 plus ourselves. And coming down the Blackbutt Range there, I said to the driver, "Aren't the bellbirds nice around here?" "Oh, stop so you can hear them," he said. The rail motor stopped, we clambered off quickly, and there's the bellbirds going boing, boing, boing all around the train. Well, we're photographing the train, our main reason for stopping, not so much the bellbirds, but the driver thought we were bird conscious.
While the railway may have been scenic for the passengers on board, to the drivers of the locomotives it proved to be challenging at times, especially around the Blackbutt Ranges.
With the Brisbane Valley Line being a long branch line, there were overnight goods trains, 2 most nights, 8:30 and 9:30 from Ipswich up to Yarraman. Very often, at least 5 times I reckon, we'd catch the train to Ipswich, buy a ticket to Yarraman, walk over to the goods yard and catch the goods train up to Yarraman overnight. These were a normal guards van with long seats, so we have a sleep on the way up. After 12:30 one night, I woke up and the train was stationary. So I looked at the window and I hear some crunch, crunch, crunch coming and the guards walking past. I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "Oh, new fireman. We've run out of steam." After a few minutes, he had his steam pressure back up and away we went.
Running out of steam, though, whilst inconvenient, wasn't the worst thing that happened to train services throughout the history of the railway. In 1890, before the railway was even open through to Bunnarkin and Blackbutt, there was a serious derailment near Esk. A cattle train had come off the tracks, damaging 9 wagons and resulting in the loss of 100 head of cattle. There was another cattle train derailment in the 1920s on the Blackbutt Range, again with the loss of a large number of cattle. Another threat to the line emerged in the 1940s, when major railway strikes occurred. This resulted in more cattle being transported by lorry rather than railway. This greatly affected the sustainability of such a line and the small communities that depended upon it to stay economically viable. Despite these negative events, the Brisbane Valley Line proved to be an essential connection to the southeast of Queensland. Eventually, though, activity on the railway started to decrease. The last regular passenger services from Ipswich to Yarraman ceased in 1969, with the rail motor services lasting until 1988, when they too came to an end. The following year, the line was officially closed to all regular services, with only the odd train tour venturing onto the line. The process of ripping up the railway took place in 1993, 80 years after the line was fully completed. The rail corridor along which the track used to lay remained silent for many years. Eventually, though, locals living along the railway line realised that this passage that had been forged through the bush offered up a great opportunity for a recreation trail, a trail that could be used by hikers, cyclists and horse riders to travel along and experience the beautiful scenery and soak up some of the history from the past decades. A project like this would take a dedicated team and many years of hard work and volunteering. Initially, there was a steering committee for the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail that aimed to turn the idea of a recreation trail into reality. However, this committee eventually disbanded when all government funding was pulled from the idea. The disbandment of the original steering committee didn't deter two South Burnett locals though. Councillor Kevin Allery and Mayor at the time, Reg McCallum, were at the forefront in making the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail a reality. With a small group of keen locals put together, the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail Ambassador Group was born. They would do everything possible to ensure the recreation trail came to fruition, but many problems stood in the way.
To have something controlled by Nanango Shire to get the insurance to cover in another shire was a real problem. With all these things, it all takes a bit of money. Then with the amalgamation, where we made a point of showing the new councillors, taking them down over the track, that they have supported it very well. That is the South Burnett Shire.
Eventually, these issues were overcome, and with financial backing from the South Burnett Regional Council, the project could get underway. There was plenty of work to get done by this group of avid volunteers, such as the installation of horse yards nearby the trail, so that horse riders had somewhere to camp the night before riding. Trail cameras and gates were also put in place for safety and security reasons. Informative signs are also placed along the length of the trail, at sites of historical significance. There are many points of interest along the rail trail from Linville to Blackbutt. It is, quite possibly, the most scenic part of the 150-kilometre stretch of railway line. Blackbutt to Linville was the first section of the trail to be officially opened, which occurred in June 2006. Cutting the ribbon was Joan Allery, the wife of Kevin Allery, who sadly passed away in 2005. His work towards making the rail trail a possibility will always be remembered for many decades to come. With the Blackbutt to Linville section proving highly popular to tourists after its opening, the Linville to Moore section soon opened the following year.
But then there were several openings. There was an opening between Lowood and Caminia, there was an opening between Caminia and Esk, an opening between Esk and Toogoolawah. There were openings all over the place. But
The rail trail was becoming an instant hit amongst tourists, and proved so popular that in November 2006, at the Queensland Outdoor Recreation Awards held in Brisbane, it took out the major prize of the night. But it wasn't the only award on the night that Reg McCallum accepted.
a recreation award for a personality. And that was another function where all this stuff was on. And guess who got it? So that was a real honour to get that. And I've treasured that. My word, I'm not letting that go.
The awards night was one of many highlights for the volunteers involved with the rail trail. However, there would be occasions where things weren't so cheerful. During the 2011 floods that hit all of Queensland, the rail trail took some major blows. There were rock slides, damage to pieces of infrastructure, and sections of the trail being washed away. The following year, the trail faced a different kind of hardship. Budget cuts in the state government meant that funding for the trail was stopped. In spite of these challenges faced by the rail trail ambassadors, they continued on. With financial backing from the South Burnett Regional Council and volunteers happy to help out for free, the rail trail was not going to be stopped. Fast forward to today, and the spirit that got them through the tough times is clearly still evident, with the rail trail still a major hit amongst tourists from all around Australia, and even overseas. Whilst the ripping up of this once great railway was indeed a sad event, It's nice to know that the painstakingly carved rail corridor has not gone to waste. Instead, it can now be enjoyed by a whole new generation in a whole new way. The next chapter of this piece of Australian history is well and truly steaming along.